I'm Dr. Gina Ross, and I'm running for U.S. Senate for the state of Missouri. I'm good trouble because people are my first priority. I will stay true to all people as I stay true to myself. I'm unbossed, unbought, and unbiased, paving the way for change. Please follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or go to my website, rossforussenate.com. We're better together, building a better tomorrow beginning today. Business as usual is no longer acceptable, and feel free to make a contribution. No dollar amount is too small. Thank you very much.
That'll be you, that'll be me, and that'll be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself. There's a liberty in Christ. I am.
All right. Well, welcome to another broadcast, and we're working with the Ross for U.S. Senate 2022 campaign, and we're with Nathan Holloway. We're going to talk about what led up to the Russian-Ukraine February 2022 invasion, Russia invading Ukraine. So he's going to share some research and that he's found in that, and it'll kind of give us a little bit better insight on what's going on and just a thought about what should we do about it, you know. All right, Nathan, thanks for joining. Take it away.
Yeah, no problem. So this all starts with 2014, or rather 2013. In 2013, there was a string of protests called the Revolution for Dignity. The Revolution for Dignity was a Ukrainian movement that wanted to try and restructure the government away from corruption, away from oligarchs in the country controlling the government and its policies in therefore of. This came to a boil in 2014 when the president of the country, I believe his name is Yanukovych. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, but the former president Yanukovych basically refused to sign a deal that was passed in the Ukrainian parliament. That would be a trade deal and a political association or freedom of political association deal with the EU, and instead turned down the Ukrainian parliament's request for that deal in favor of a trade deal with EEU, or the Eurasian Economic Union, which is the union that is formed under Russia and other economic interests tied to Russia. So because of this, a lot of people got really angry really fast. They started to clash with police all over the country. They started to go into government buildings. They started to take over government buildings. And eventually it came to such a point that the government of Ukraine had to pass anti-protester laws. These anti-protester laws dictating that you cannot assemble an X amount of people, you cannot assemble at X times in X places, you cannot have the freedom of assembly that we here in America understand as a basic fundamental right of our country. They could not do that over there in Ukraine at this time. This led to even more agitation by the Ukrainian protesters as they started to make their way all over the country, but more importantly, in the capital, Kiev, they started making their way to the parliament building itself. Now, this led to violent clashes with the police. The most notable one being the most deadly one, which happened in, I want to say, either February, March, or April 19th through the 20th. I can't remember the exact month, but it was the 19th through the 20th, and it led to 108 people dying. and I believe about 27 others being wounded.
Mhm.
They got so bad that they had to set up snipers to try and suppress the protesters all across the capital city of Kiev and across other parts of Ukraine. What finally came down to all this ending was the president, Yanukovych, and the opposition parties of Ukraine signed an agreement saying that the government is to be restructured and reformed, and Yanukovych was supposed to step down. Not only did he agree to this, he stepped down, but he fled the city and he fled the country. Now, this didn't sit well with his supporters. Mainly, he had a lot of support in the east and in the south, which are coincidentally where Crimea and what we know as the Donbass region is. So this is kind of where the pieces start to fall into place to understand what's going on today.
Mhm.
If we can get the
Okay. Get the slides up here. All right.
yes, please.
There you go.
Yes. So as I said
Can you
previously,
take us back to that previous slide to get a good picture of that?
yeah,
Okay. So
this
here's
is the map of Ukraine right
Mhm.
now. The parts in gray are what are known as either occupied territories by Russia or breakaway nations in the making. The LDR and the KDR, I believe, which stand for the Donetsk, the Donetsk People's Republic, and the Luhansk People's Republic.
okay.
These are the things that have been taken away from Ukraine over the course from 2014 to right now.
Hmm.
This doesn't show the invasion happening. This is just what is not a part of Ukraine that was a part of Ukraine before 2014.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Good.
And as I said, 2014 was the tipping point for all of this. This slide just explains what I previously just said, but to expound on that further, during 2014, they being Russia, decided to intervene in a sense. Russia saw that the overthrow of Yanukovych to be illegal. They thought it was an illegal coup.
Mhm.
And actually, Yanukovych asked for Russian help during this turbulent time.
Mm.
Russia, seeing the turbulence of this and wanting Crimea, they decided to go ahead and bolster the native Russian population in those regions to be more vocal, be more outwards, and to try and make a case for these regions to belong to Russia. In the case of Crimea, they bolstered up the native Russian population and Russian separatist movements. And these movements and groups decided to take over government buildings. They decided to go from small local regions until they got their way to Sevastopol, which is the key city in that region of Crimea. Sevastopol was the turning point for this. Once these separatist and Russian nationalists or Russian backed groups, these groups that want to be part of Russia, whatever you prefer to call them or whatever they are classified as, they took over Sevastopol government buildings, to which then they had an election and a referendum of the population deciding whether to be a part of Ukraine or to be a part of Russia. The legality of this referendum is questioned, but the end result is that Crimea went to Russia. During this time, it was said that Russia sent in humanitarian aid, along with a bunch of unmarked soldiers with no insignia, tying them to any formal branch of the Russian military or Russian government. But it was highly suspected that they were there and they were helping influence and make things violent during this referendum and seize of power in Crimea. The exact same thing was happening in the Donbass region, which is the provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk. I really hope I'm trying to pronounce
Luhansk, maybe Luhansk.
Maybe I am not a linguist expert.
Yeah, that's pretty close there. Yeah.
I'm not a linguist expert, but the exact same thing was happening in these regions, which we commonly refer to the Donbass region collectively. During this time, as I said, the south, being Crimea and the bordering counties to the north of Crimea, were very supportive of the former president, Yanukovych. And the east, which we know as the Donbass region, or at least parts of the Donbass region, were also very supportive of Yanukovych, which is why the similar things happened in the Donbass region. A lot of people, now, to start this off, these started off as just protests by the native population being against the newly formed Ukrainian government. These people didn't like it. They liked Yanukovych, and they, one way or another, didn't like the new direction this new government was going, or they preferred the old government and the stability under it versus the turbulence of a new government being formed, whichever way they went on it.
Okay, so the current president is
Zelensky.
Okay,
Yes.
so he was not in power in 2014.
No,
Okay.
He was a actor and comedian at that point.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we had an actor for president too, though, didn't we?
Yeah, we had an
Yeah.
actor as the president too. Yeah.
What Ronald Reagan was an actor, and I think several others may not have officially had that title, but I think they do pretty good when it comes to convincing the American public of some things. So during that time, it wasn't the current president, but the one before that was having issues with keeping the country together. Crimea wanted to be Donbas and Crimea wanted to be one up under the Russian government. Is that what I'm hearing?
Not exactly.
Okay.
So it is split between people who were vocally for the unification of these regions with Russia against the people who wanted to stay with Ukraine.
Okay.
Unfortunately for the people who wanted to stay with Ukraine, the people that wanted to unite with Russia or be under Russian rule, or in the case of Donbass, have their own autonomous regions, Russia stepped in and supplied effort to those voices and those movements that were against remaining with Ukraine, which tipped the scale in the favor of Crimea being taken to Russia. And in the case of the Donbass, Donetsk and Luhansk being declared autonomous regions.
Okay. So now, because I've heard Crimea during this current conflict.
Yes.
So what's going on with them now? They want to be a part of Russia, or they are a part of Russia, or they want to be a part of the Ukraine now?
So in terms of Crimea, as of right now in 2022, we don't have a lot of information about what the people of Crimea want, at least not that I have found in my research. We are not sure exactly what the people of Crimea want in that sense. But what it is, in effect, the case is that it is viewed by Russia as a part of Russia, and they believe that to be so. what most of the Western world, being the rest of Europe and America, Canada, and all these normalized Western powers, they believe that Crimea still belongs to Ukraine in sense, but was annexed by Russia, which remains it's Russian occupied, not fully a part of Russia, but just occupied by Russia.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like China and Hong Kong.
China and Hong Kong are a different situation. Hong Kong is recognized as an autonomous region with its own government and its own system. Crimea falls under the Russian jurisdiction and the Russian government as of right now.
Okay.
Hong Kong is its own autonomous region, which kind of like how we have federalism here in America, what the federal government does, in this case, the federal government being the People's Republic of China, they can say these are generalized things that the country will follow, but then you get to federalism and the states can make their own laws, which is kind of the case for Hong Kong. It isn't a one-to-one comparison, but that's the best way to try to describe it to people who don't know a lot about it.
Okay, super. Thanks for educating us. That's what I like about what you do, Nathan, is the research analyst. One thing about the campaign is, we don't just shoot from the hip. We research what's going on and then try to educate ourselves and others so that Dr. Ross can share the ideal that will make things better, not just say what everyone else is saying and the news media is saying this and this time and that time or whatever. Just because it's in the news media, it doesn't mean that it's correct.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it's always the way that it needs to be. And I think that what we need to do is what we're doing. It's doing a little bit more research to find out what the real deal is for what's actually going on. So then when they start, making accusations and suggesting that things need to change or be different, or the funding, that's always a big issue. We need to support. Okay, what are we supporting? Why are we funding? See, we have a better idea of what's going on.
Yes.
Okay, so what's going on at this point? The new Ukrainian government started to fire back.
Yes. So, as I said, in the Donbass region, these protests normally just started as a native population being against, in one way or another, against the newly formed government, and they were vocal about it, but they didn't take up armed action. It wasn't until separatist groups and Russian-backed groups or other groups of that sort of propriety started to get involved themselves into these protests, into these areas of conflict. These people then decided to take it upon themselves with either their own weapons and ideas of what is to be, or with help from the Russians, to declare these two regions autonomous zones.
Okay.
They started by doing the same tactics, going into government buildings and kicking out the Ukrainian government officials there to prop up their own. Then it came to a boiling point to where the Ukrainian government tried to quell these separatist movements. It was best described as a region in rebellion. It was not viewed by the Ukrainian government as a civil war or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It was viewed as a region in rebellion, which has certain connotations to it. That their movement isn't legitimate, that, this isn't the will of the people. This is just a bunch of opportunists trying to do whatever they want with an autonomous state. To which then the Ukrainian government has fought these guys for 8 years now.
Wow. See.
Yeah, they started opening fire back in 2014. a couple months after Crimea was lost, trying not to lose any more of what the Ukrainian government, or the newly formed Ukrainian government, saw as rightful Ukrainian territory to Russia. They decided to fight against these guys, these separatist people who wanted to be a part of Russia, whatever have you. They decided to fight them with weapons and destruction, to which then radicalized a lot more people of the Donbass region to either flee into Ukraine for refuge or to take up arms themselves and try to defend or seek vengeance, or any number of reasons why people would take up guns.
Yeah, that what we're looking at now is what? What is it? Why would Russia, what is Russia wanting? And why are they there? Why did they bomb? Why are they dropping bombs and fighting and invading the Ukraine now?
Well, it comes down to what's two key factors that the Russian government themselves have proclaimed. We can make assumptions about whether these are the real goals or not, but based off the information we have, we know that these are the two things they have said and are executing as their modus operandi. These are their mission objectives: to demilitarize and to denazify Ukraine. To demilitarize is to take away the weapons of war, the operations of war in Ukraine, to make it a peaceful nation, or a peaceful nation. To which, during the first few weeks of this invasion, we saw that they were doing. They were bombing bases. They were bombing military infrastructure. They were staying away from civilian targets.
Okay.
Until these civilian targets posed a perceived military benefit, a perceived military operation of sorts, to which then they started getting bombed. And then the invasion forces started rolling further into Ukraine. When they started rolling further into Ukraine, in the east, some people fought because the Ukrainian National Defense Forces thought that there was a possibility for a Russian attack sooner rather than later. So they did set up preliminary forces along the borders that were not in rebellion, to which then the Russian army quickly moved past them. Their goal of denazification is a little bit more abstract. We can concretely see and objectively measure the efforts of the Russian military trying to demilitarize, but it's a lot harder to see what the Russian military is classifying as denazification. Russia perceives that there is a neo-Nazi movement, a nationalistic movement in Ukraine that is threatening native Russians or ethnic Russians in Ukraine. This comes in the form of the Azov Battalion, the most notable one, and other right-wing paramilitary groups that took up means to help defend and ready Ukrainians after 2014 happened. These groups popped up all over Ukraine, radicalizing and training people to be ready to fight Russians when and if the time came. They were there before 2014, but they grew a whole lot more after 2014. And they continued to grow and grow and grow until 2022, when the invasion happened. Russia is using these groups and their ties to the Ukrainian government, whether directly or indirectly, as the key thing that Ukraine is being Nazified. Ukraine is being nationalized. Not nationalized in an economic sense, but nationalized in a political ideological sense. They are Russia is afraid that they are trying to kick out the ethnic Russians, the Russian speakers, and have a nationalist Ukraine, to which there have been conflicting reports. There have been everything under the sun said about whether this is true, whether this is not true, whether it's somewhere in the middle. But what we do know is that the Azov Battalion, the most notable far-right neo-Nazi group militia in Ukraine, has been officially adopted by the Ukrainian military during this invasion. And they have been given the Hero of Ukraine awards to these to people in this battalion, which is basically our Medal of Honor.
Are we seeing this? Are we hearing this in the media, in our media, United States media? Is that being shared?
It depends on where you look.
Yeah.
And it depends on how well you notice certain images floating around in the media. Some people will post images of the Azov Battalion saying that they are just a militia trying to help their neighbors and their country fend off the Russians. But if you look closely on some of the insignias they carry neo-Nazi insignias, mainly the Black Sun, which is a neo-Nazi symbol. And even, I believe it was NATO, posted pictures of Ukrainian militia trying to help people affected by the invasion, people that were hurt, lost their homes, or they were fighting on the front lines. And these pictures showed them having neo-Nazi insignia on their uniforms.
Wow. Wow. So the plot thickens. It's not so much as, well, so now the invasion did happen.
Yes.
Russia's saying, look, we're doing this for the two reasons, the good reasons that you pointed out during your research, and to demilitarize Ukraine and to denazify Ukraine. And you're right, when we first started hearing things through the media, the mainstream media here in the United States, we, did hear where they were bombing and the different stations, military stations, and then the United States returned by sending over military gear and funding for the military. So in support of what Ukraine is doing, the efforts that Russia has done to wipe out their military, well, the United States, they're funding the military. So there seems to be a disconnect here. There's a tug of war of something that is causing this, because who wants to have a Nazi, like the German Nazis, reoccur and walk this planet ever again in a force? I mean, no one wants that. And with today's weaponry, I know that the world would not last very long if that did happen, because I just think people are just out of their freaking minds. I think you've got to be out of your mind to hate on that level. You cannot destroy your brother on that level and think that you're going to survive, So it's very interesting in what's going on here. But of course, that's another ideal of what's happening, another view of research. Who really knows what's going on?
Yeah.
I think that this research is good. But what I've also heard is that too, and this is just me not researching, but just kind of hearing that this tug of war, because it is a war between Ukraine and Russia, has been going on for hundreds of years. There's no, this is not a new thing, right?
Yeah.
This is same old soup, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that the distraction of what war brings is more too of a concern. If I'm being distracted by war, then what's really going on? What's the cover up all about?
Mhm.
And why is it so important now when this has also been going on in 2014? And Russia is not. They're not innocent when it comes to world
Oh,
relations and getting
yeah.
along with the world. They're definitely not innocent in that. They have supported many, many wars and skirmishes and takeovers, even in the great continent of Africa. Several
Mhm.
African nations that have gone through with Russia funding
Yeah.
war and civil unrest and
Mhm.
civil wars, which in turn, when you fight inward amongst each other, then it puts a strain on that nation. You can't focus on taking care of your people and raising crops and food and education and providing a safe living environment. You can't focus on making life better because you're at war or
Yeah.
you're funding a civil war somewhere to make it a distraction. So then that way you can go in and take from that country.
Mhm.
Rwanda was something that I was doing
Yeah.
research. Russia was right there.
Right. Yeah.
You know, funding this uh, and with it being a civil war, what are you funding? These are people that have been going through for a long time with each other, and then one's going to fund the other, and then have a superpower is going to have a force and a presence there to continue on. And we know what happened in Rwanda. That was
Yeah.
truly genocide,
Now, yes.
truly genocide. So now we're hearing about the well, our president called this a genocidal effort going
Mhm.
on by the Russians. Okay, yes, chemical warfare is wrong. It's warfare, and we're still trying to figure this thing out, you know. But I think that when we're looking at what's been happening in the past, no one is innocent here, and we can go on too with how our country has handled themselves when it comes
Mhm.
to causing civil unrest in nations in order to, for the sake of whatever, taking resources. I'm just going to say that. I know that we're not innocent in it because we do have a big stake in having needing oil or energy too. So those countries that do have oil, it's just kind of weird how we seem to go in and fight for the liberation of those people. And oh, by the way, it means taking over and killing the heads of state there that have gone in and made that country better. But of course, they made them very wealthy too. That country
Yeah.
wealthy, and to go in and take the wealth by killing it, the leadership and the headship. Uh, have you seen anything as far as the economy, the economic situation? What is this?
Yes. So, in terms of the economy, I haven't really looked too much on the Ukrainian side. I've been focusing more on the economy of Russia since they are the aggressor and they are the ones perpetrating this war and uh, continuing it on and on. Uh, what it looks like from the Russian side, economic wise, is that these sanctions are really hitting the Russian economy, but the Russian economy is starting to bounce back a little bit. Maybe a week or two ago, a ruble was worth $1,000. Or no, sorry, I mixed it. $1 American dollar was worth 1,000 rubles.
Mhm.
Now it's trending downwards. I believe it was somewhere around an American dollar equals 800 rubles.
Mhm. That's
Uh,
a pretty big trending there. It seems in favor of what the Russians are doing, in spite of all of the different sanctions that the United States um, and European Union, is that who's also putting sanctions, or is it NATO?
Different European countries are putting
Mm.
sanctions on Russia. Western powers, Canada, America, New Zealand, Australia, Japan. These other countries are putting sanctions on Russia. The EU, as an effort, the trade deals that EU and Russia do have, mainly the Nord Streams and other pipelines going from Russia through Eastern Europe into Western European countries, have been sanctioned. I don't really know if NATO as an organization
Mhm.
has issued any sanctions.
Mhm.
If they have the power to, I would not be surprised if they did.
Mhm.
But there is a lot of sanctions going on, and most of these sanctions are hurting the Russian people, not necessarily the Russian government. One thing that we as Americans have to understand is that after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia was gobbled up in sectors of oligarchs. And these oligarchs, after the fall of the Soviet Union, have concentrated their power, concentrated their money, concentrated everything that they possibly can. And since Putin has come to power, these oligarchs have gotten more and more wealthier, and thus funding Putin and the government more or less.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
power of the governments and the people in charge get their power and strength and money from these oligarchs. They don't get it from the people. So when we put these sanctions on the people, we
Mm.
are hoping that they have enough of it and they try to do something and they take action into their own hands. These sanctions hurt the people, and it has never been proven that sanctions stop any kind of war, any
Mhm.
kind of government action.
Mhm.
There's no proof that sanctions do anything besides hurt the people of the country they are imposed upon.
Mhm. Well, with you sharing even the numbers of what the ruble is to the dollar, now that it's faring better, then that's just proven a proven point too. And I think that they also have an ally, Russia does now, and that's China. So China and Russia are coming together to as allies, which is makes it even more interesting. Um, but
Uh,
what do you think?
in regards to the situation with Russia and China, it is a very complicated and geopolitically, ideologically uh,
Mhm.
complicated issue.
Mhm. I think so.
Russia
Mhm.
and China have a history uh, going back to the Soviet Union,
Now,
going back
don't they
to,
share borders? Don't they
they
share a
do share
border?
borders.
Mhm.
Uh, Wait, yes, no, not after the fall of the
Close.
Soviet Union, they don't. They're
Okay.
close, but after the fall of the Soviet Union, those borders no longer touch.
Mhm. Hmm. But
Uh,
close enough in a way too, though. Maybe they don't touch, but they're
they are close somewhat economically.
mhm.
They Russia is a part of some Asian trading organizations because of their easternmost ports. Uh,
Mhm.
and they do trade with Japan, Korea, sometimes even the United States and Canada, depending on the trading organization that they are a part of.
Okay.
But in terms of China trying to support Russia through this, China does take the stance that there is a Nazi problem in Ukraine and it does need to be solved. They have come outwardly and said that the way to solve this is not through invasion, but through taking out these members of far-right organizations in Ukraine.
Mhm.
It is very complicated and not clear what China's goal is with this, what they plan to do with this loose alignment on policy, tactics.
Mhm.
It's not clear, at least from what I have read. Yes, there have been Chinese state actors that have openly support for the invasion or for what Russia is doing, but as China's government as a whole, I do not remember anything coming out from the body itself in support or in not support of this conflict.
Mhm. Cool. That Ussuri River uh, it seems to have a considerable forms a distance boundary between China and Russia up
Mhm.
in near Siberia, from what I can see. Uh, but still, the fact that they're they hang out with the coal people. That's way Siberia. I mean, oh Lord, that's just too cold. So they don't touch, but there are some boundaries there. Yes. Well, what can we expect? What do you think? What do you think is going to happen moving forward? Just the next month or so.
Um, Based on the way that the Russians are advancing, or in this case, uh, falling back, the Russian army is not equipped for the modern style of warfare. Yes, they have been involved in conflicts in Syria. They have been involved in conflicts all over the world after the fall of the Soviet Union, but the Russian military has not fully adopted out of the style that they were prepared for during the Cold War.
Hmm.
Russia was prepared for a land war. Uh, I'm sorry, the Soviet Union was prepared for a land war uh, in Europe during their time in case anything got out. The style of that kind of military is grossly outdated as of 2022.
Hmm.
But Russia has not updated their military to this new style of warfare. And the way the tactics and the advancements and retreats of Ukraine are going proves this.
Hmm.
They thought that they would send their units and army in to easily take over Ukraine. And these drones, these javelins, rocket launchers, handheld, portable detonation devices. The Russian army is not being prepared for that, which is why we recently saw the retreat out of Kiev. Whether that's the truth or they are planning something else and Kiev was a distraction is yet to be seen. But as of right now, as it looks like the Russian army was not prepared for any of the equipment being sent into Ukraine by other militaries and other militaries around the world. They were sending their tanks into convoy lines 10 kilometers wide or 10 kilometers long. And they would be blown up by drones. They would be blown up by missiles. They would be thrown up by RPGs or propelled rockets coming out of javelins, coming out of short, long, medium range propulsion devices, which greatly stop the advancement of trucks, tanks, fuels, supply lines getting to the troops on the front line in the Russian forces. They are not caught up to date when they are the ones waging war.
Yeah, that's a very interesting. It's what's happening, and we hear about it. I don't know, like you say, if they're just blowing smoke to, fake. We call faking or acting like a possum type.
Yeah.
They're just acting like a possum, or if this is for real. But I just can't imagine doing all of what you do, and then doing the invasion, and then not going in and doing the best that you can to meet the goal. And they're claiming these the invasion, even though the retreat has happened by the Russians, they're still sending propaganda in Russia saying that they're being victorious. They have the victory in this. Um, just kind of a strange situation, and I think that as Americans, we don't want to fall for the okie doke. We're not quite sure, but with there's smoke, there's fire. If it's
Yep.
stinky, there's some poo somewhere.
Yep.
so, so that's just kind of how I think about it. It doesn't quite smell right, so we'll
Yep.
have to see what's going on. Wow, Nathan, just super, super presentation. Do you have anything else for us, or are you good with what you've shared, or do we need to just come back and talk about something else a little later?
The only thing I would say is another option for us and other countries to try and step up to do is to, and this is a controversial opinion, I am well aware of that. We need to stop sending weapons into Ukraine. We need to start sending medical supply. We need to start sending aid. We need to try and get out as many people that can and want to get out as we possibly can and harbor them to safety. The more this war goes on, the more people are going to die.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I know people don't want Russia to have victory in this. They don't want Ukraine to become a puppet to Russia. And I understand that. But when we continue this war, we are only prolonging the death of every Ukrainian, or we're only increasing the death of every Ukrainian. We're only increasing the death of every
Mhm.
Russian soldier
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
all those who are affected and killed off by sanctions.
Mhm. Mhm. Killed off by sanctions. I think what we're hearing now. This is April the 13th, 2022. What we're hearing too is that they're saying that Russia has resorted to chemical war.
There have been some reports by
Some
Ukrainian
reports.
militia,
Mhm.
yes,
Yeah.
especially in the Mariupol region, which is currently being besieged by the Russian
Mhm.
army.
Mhm. And just to that report was given, but the world is being cautious to respond in that way because they're saying it's hard to prove.
It is hard to prove. I
That.
mean, that's the whole reason that
Mhm.
we had a hard time proving Assad used chemical weapons in the first place.
Mhm. Mhm.
When the Syrian war broke out and there was reports of chemical weapons, it was taken very seriously, but there was just no signs for I want to say maybe a year or two of
Mhm.
any chemical weapons even being in the country.
Mhm. Mhm. So that could be more smoke, more mirrors, more something
It
to.
could be, or they could actually be using chemical weapons.
They
It
could
is
be.
it is very hard to say.
It's hard to say. Sure. Well, we are going to keep an ear out for all of what's going on, and I think one of the main things we can do is pray. That's one of my suggestions. Is to pray for the situation so that the right thing will be done. And of course, yes, for the people. And of course, we want to do all we can. No one wants to see citizens of any country go down in peril because of fighting nations bickering between each other for whatever reason. But we definitely don't want any Nazism popping up again. And if that's the case, then everyone needs to get on board and do what they need to do to support and squash and be that help the situation by analyzing through it. What can be done. Not just pointing fingers and calling people uh, genocide. That
Yeah.
type thing. That's not helping. Is what That's not helping. But definitely, what a great report. Thank you for the overview. Thank you for uh, the historical overview of why Russia and the Ukraine are where they are. I think that's important to know. And thank you for your opinion. I think that that's important too in what needs to happen because we as Americans, we can form opinions. But we do it based on the information that we have. If we're doing it with mainstream media, voicing our opinions and coming to conclusions about what needs to happen based on mainstream media alone, then we're kind of at a disadvantage because a lot of sensationalism is going on there and people just want to make the most exciting report to win or whatever, not so much the most accurate report, but at least the most sensationalized report. There's some type of journalism that happens in that way, but journalists are being affected too. They're losing their lives over there too, from what we
Yeah.
understand, and that's not cool either. So, but we appreciate you, Nathan. Nathan
Thank you.
Holloway. Now he is the research analyst for the Ross for U.S. Senate 2022 campaign. And he is now, Nathan, you are a political student, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
And in St. Louis, Missouri. So if people are interested in politics, you can't get any closer than to go ahead and study it and make it part of your career. So we appreciate you and your efforts. I know that finals are going to be coming up and everything and research papers and all that, but you took the time to do the research for us and to help us get a better understanding of this Russian Ukraine issue. So we appreciate you. Thanks a lot. Hold on a
Thank you.
minute. Don't go anywhere.
Oh, just as I was saying too. Now this is a voter registration card. Register to vote now. For those of you that have internet, computers, get on that internet, get on that computer, and register to vote. You also have Board of Election places that if you have questions, you can address and go out there. If you go out to rossforussenate.com, there is a place where you can click and it'll give you information. It'll take you right to the Missouri website so that you can register to vote. You can register to vote online. You can go down to the Board of Elections and go down there, take a trip. You can contact them, the Board of Elections, and have them send information. But here's what Dr. Gina did. She went and got some voter registration cards, and on the back of them, they're going to be mailed, and they'll be mailed to the Platte County Board of Elections. And they're in Platte City. So she's a resident of that county and still is active. We have so many counties. I think it's 114 counties here in Missouri. And of those counties, every single one of them is important. Because when you vote and you have representation in that county, that means funds are coming your way. The funds would come your way to help your county be a better place to live. And that's what's important. You want your place to be the best place to live in Missouri. Missourians are great people. They really are. Hardworking. You know, we're all just out here doing the best we can. And when it comes to, I'm sure there's some super snooties out there, but for the most part, I come across good Americans, good Missourians that are considerate, hardworking. They want the same things that we all want as far as the foundation of being a human being. We want a good place, clean place to raise our children, and we care. We care. We come together. There are communities in the state of Missouri where they come together and speak out against things that aren't right. Dr. Jana, she's still working, passing things out, talking to people, networking. You know, you can't do this without having a passion for people, without caring for people. If you care for the money, you can throw money at it, anything, and just, okay, well, I did this. Well, you really didn't do it. You didn't do it. You paid someone to do it. You threw it out there, threw the money out there and paid someone to do it, which we all need help. That's a great thing. That's okay. But what about those that will get out there and talk to people and listen to all people, not just some people, but all people, to where they know she understands. That understanding's big. All right. So register to vote as soon as possible.
We're better together.